Good morning everyone. My name is Sarah Doherty and I'm the Marketing and Event Coordinator here at Hornbill. I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining today's webinar where we will be having a presentation on Service Request Reporting and Reporting for KPI Performance with Samurai Estefanos, Professional Service Lead here at Hornbill. Just to inform you, Delegate Auto will be muted during the presentation to help facilitate flow and timekeeping. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the GoToMeeting question facility on the right-hand side of your screen. We will collate questions and answer them at the end of the presentation. Thank you for taking the time to attend. I will now pass you over to Samurai.
Hi everybody. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. I've just hit the play button. Right, okay, so welcome to the Service Request Reporting and Reporting for KPI Performance Academy session. The synopsis for which was to have a brief look at existing reports created to deliver insight on requests logged against services within the service catalog, as well as a general sort of look at request fulfillment KPIs and what we might consider when creating them. And I think look at the data held within the SupportWorks database as well in order to give you some more information about how to get the data out. So I want to start the session off by saying, obviously, that this will hopefully give you a start in terms of sort of service request reporting and reporting for KPIs, or even sort of considering the creation of KPIs. Some of you may already be working with a set of KPIs and are looking to maybe enhance them, improve them a little bit, or maybe you have the KPIs but you're not quite sure how to get the data out in order to see how you're faring with those sort of metrics. And hopefully today you'll get a little bit of information. It's by no means the only thing that you should refer to. If you do a simple sort of online search for KPI development and all that kind of stuff, or service reporting, you'll get a multitude of information. So please sort of take this as a starting point, if you like, or an introduction, or maybe a brief look at how, from my perspective, that I think we would do this sort of thing. But please refer to other sources as well and sort of formulate your own sort of opinions on how you go about doing this, because this is very specific to your business context. It's not something that any one person can tell you this is sort of the template and you go away and sort of do it. It doesn't quite work like that. So what are we actually talking about? We're talking about reporting, and more specifically reporting on the services and service requests that are logged in SupportWorks. So the first time that I actually had this discussion, which is some years back now, the conversation lasted about 10 seconds before the person said, we use incidents, not service requests. After that initial shock, thinking that I misunderstood or I misheard, I wanted to say, what do you mean you don't use service requests? But then I very quickly realized that, without there being a specific business driver, it's a fairly valid approach. I mean, what's wrong with tracking everything as an incident? In terms of being able to capture that data, and so long as you have all the information there, there's nothing wrong with that. If the business isn't making any demands for information on the type of requests, or customers are happy to provide what they want by either describing in the text box or answering several questions, and analysts can take the hit in terms of ensuring that whatever's been requested in terms of the detail that's on the incident is progressed accordingly, according to what the customer's provided. If all incidents that are logged are investigated properly, and all incidents that are requests are completed correctly, the way that they should be, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a valid way of working. You know what they say about if it's not broken. But if the complete opposite of that is true, then essentially it means that you have to split service requests from incidents. And in fact, in terms of SupportWorks, it already does that for us. We don't have to do anything extra. And in fact, you make a conscious decision to not use what's already there and pile everything onto the incident and the incident logging form, and start to use SupportWorks slightly differently when you start to keep everything within the same core class. Incidentally, since I've had that conversation, I've seen several instances, several customer instances where they were doing exactly that. They were capturing incidents as well as the well, all the break fix as well as the low impact changes within the incident call class. It was cumbersome to say the least, and in most cases, although the actual capturing of the data wasn't an issue, the management of the data once it's been captured was an issue. And in fact, instead of splitting it out the way that support work splits out from the very beginning, all of these cases had to split it out once they were reporting on it. So if everything is being tracked as an incident, it's easy to sort of see that in one list. It's easy to be able to say, this is my backlog right now, and you can sort of direct all your analysts to sort of working on the backlog, and it's not too much of an effort at that point. But when you're trying to make sense of what has been recorded, when you're trying to sort of go through the process of looking at what has been captured, when you're trying to work out how many incidents have been logged, how many incidents have been reopened, how many incidents have been cancelled, how many incidents have fallen within the SLA, how many have been outside of the SLA. In terms of service request fulfillment, if you're looking at the average fulfillment time, if you're looking at the requests that have been authorized and the ones that have been rejected, and looking at the different types of requests that are being logged, it becomes really, really difficult if you're doing that within the same sort of call class. And in fact, all the instances that I saw that were using the incident call class had an extra task of having to re-request the SLA or reset the SLA once the initial time had been spent to work out what it is that was actually being recorded. And that on the fly means that you're having to change the SLAs, and therefore, if you spent a number of hours already sort of looking at things or keeping things in place, ticking with a specific incident SLA, and then changing it to a request SLA, you've lost all of that time already. So just to separate out incidents properly then from service requests, I want to go through what the difference between the two are, with a specific description about why we would split out the processes as well. So incidents are unplanned events, typically referred to as break-fix issues, although in the new Hornbill customer world, it's not so true anymore, with departments that are non-IT based adopting the use of support works. But typically, incidents result in some sort of disruption or reduced quality of service. And in terms of a process, you would typically have the incident logged, data captured, categorized, prioritized, and then an initial assessment of the issue made, typically referred to as the incident diagnosis. At that point, the issue, if it isn't resolved, is escalated and then investigated further, resolved, and then closed. So a fairly succinct but simple process, allowing all incidents to go through exactly the same process. Regardless of what it is, if it's break fix, you are putting it through the exact same process, allowing you to put metrics like trying to resolve 80% of incidents logged at the first contact, that sort of stuff. And there's only been really one instance of where I saw two processes for incident management, and that was only because the organization made a conscious decision to keep security-based incidents separately being dealt with by a separate team from the non-security based incidents. So service requests then, firstly quickly to sort of define what a service is and what a service request is. A service is a consumable, and for those of you that are familiar with the SupportWorks services screen or service portfolio screen, that's essentially what we would refer to as a service. It's the area that allows you to define the service. It can be a technical service or a business service, and typical examples might be sort of new starter, hardware request. Those sorts of things would be the things that we would call a service, or you have an email service or internet access. And those sorts of things are also services that are consumable, but wouldn't necessarily have a request against them. A service request then is transactional, and it's typically the thing that you would log against a particular service. So you might log a service request in order to put it through the process for when somebody is requesting a new starter. So as I said, we'll take a look at that area later on in order to sort of, solidify the areas that I'm talking about. But essentially, the service request is a request for the fulfillment of a specific requirement, typically defined as a service, planned low-impact change made available via subscription to the service, and delivered through the progression of a specific set of steps. So the idea, the various channels that these requests come through haven't been mentioned so far, but clearly they are important in terms of making a difference in the delivery, or more importantly, the misdelivery, or even the avoidance of reporting any specific issue or requirement, but not so important for this session. But what is important is that incidents can be managed via a single process, whereas service requests are likely to require a more detailed and specific set of steps. And the image that's currently on the screen, probably not so greatly depicted, but is supposed to be depicting the fact that you might have a single process to track all your incidents through. Top left-hand corner, top left-hand process, basically depicting a basic incident process where something would be reported, investigated, and if it can't be resolved, then escalated, and then investigated further, resolved, and then closed. Whereas the right-hand section then depicting several processes that might be used to sort of track through whatever the request is. So for instance, the bottom left-hand corner showing that there is an iterative task section allowing you to constantly create tasks for a specific request depending on whether a value was completed within the request details. So in SupportWorks, you actually have the ability to check conditions and create tasks. So you can continuously check that condition and make tasks appear based on whether there is more work to be done in order to fulfill this particular request. And that's not typical, to be honest. It's not typical in terms of sort of having that scenario. In most cases, you're going to have requests that are defined from beginning to end and you know exactly how to deliver them. There have been instances, and this is the reason why I've included it in there, because there have been instances where customers have wanted to be able to sort of lump a few requests in with one process. But typically you would have many processes sort of used to track your service requests. So the business of understanding that these call types should be split and creating an environment where this is an accepted practice as well as becoming more service-centric is part of your maturity process. Initially you may start out with a basic set of steps allowing you to simply capture details and then allow your analysts to determine what's needed. But over time, as you become more efficient and begin to start achieving your objectives, new ones will be developed and they'll be based on historical information, or in order to scale you may need to adopt new practices which require strict adherence to data capture and process automation and so on and so on. But essentially it means that incident investigation remains largely the same and the same set of steps, whereas service request fulfillment may change and in fact will change. So knowing this now, and even if you're not already exploring the possibility, puts you in a much better place when you do want to mature, scale and improve your operation. In order to do these things, you will need to know where you outperform and where you don't, where you have a process that can scale and where you don't, where you can project the usage based on historical information, where trends can feed into resource management, allowing you to make more efficient decisions on resource allocation. Essentially, how you can manage, measure, and improve performance across your operation. So I've got a couple of slides with some key points to take away, and they're sort of things that you should, within each section, things that I think you should sort of consider. So this one here is specifically about why we would split incidents from service requests. And just before moving on, in order to reiterate, there are ways to extract data from a single call class if, as I said, you use incidents to track both incidents and service requests. But then that means you have a single mechanism to manage the requests. You could incorrectly categorize and prioritize the requests. There isn't an instant understanding of the request in terms of being able to work out what that actual request is for. Although at first it seems like it would be easier for your customers, in fact, what you're doing when you do use the single core class is that you're making them provide more detail unnecessarily. So you're having to put more effort into the questions that you ask them in order to be able to determine what it is that this request is about, without giving them the ability to simply make the choice by clicking to say that it's a request or whether it's an issue. And then reports become more complex because you're having to include more criteria. You're having to do essentially the splitting up at that point. Separating them out means that you free up resource to concentrate on non-standard and low-impact changes. It allows us to separately measure the performance and making it easier for customers in general, as well as having the ability to create cleaner reports. So, going back to KPIs then, who needs them? Well, it isn't a case of whether you need them or not. They are a great way to determine if your operation, your team is heading in a successful direction. With the right set of indicators, you can confirm performing stars in terms of operation and people, as well as areas requiring attention. Popular sayings such as the you can't manage what you can't measure, or whatever you measure gets done, goes some way to indicating the importance of setting targets and having metrics. Metrics are an important part of my team's daily, weekly and monthly activities, as they've got targets that they have to strive to achieve, and it's only when they've got they've got the tools that show them, and in fact they have dashboards, personal dashboards that give them details of how they currently stand in comparison to the targets that are set, that enables them to sort of make conscious decisions that help them achieve the targets that have been set. And I'm talking about consultancy utilization, but I could be talking about any set of targets within any department, within any organization. There are obviously some do's and don'ts with KPIs, and many online guides are available to help you. There is something that I think is commonly missed, and that is people, when you're setting these KPIs, you should measure what is important. We have a tendency to sort of create things just because we can. We can create these metrics and have them displayed because they look nice when they're being shown on dashboards and they show that things are happening, but actually, if they're not important, then there's no reason to have them. And the key is not to be hasty when you're doing this, to sort of think about what it is that you're setting, to sort of think about the targets and what you're aiming for. It's only realized, usually once it's too late, once you've created them and you've stuck them up, and somebody gets the task of creating these things and they go away and they do them and they put them up and they look pretty, and then at some point when someone really starts to look at the detail and what we're how we're benefiting from this, having spent all of that time putting them together, it's only then that it's actually realized that they're not that important. And a metric that I often see is the percentage of incidents outside of SLA fix, and in fact you'll see it in your SupportWorks instance, and it's only a starting point in support, and we'll talk about the reports that are available. But if you're coming from an area where you don't have any metrics, then it's probably a good starting point. It's better to have something than nothing. But at some point you're going to start to think about the types of incidents. No two are the same. Well, actually, that's not true, but I mean, lumping all incidents into one metric can be quite concealing. This metric for some organizations, where a single incident is classed as critical, will outweigh all the dozens of others that are logged that have a minimal interruption, and therefore this particular metric, where the number of incidents outside of SLA fix, for the majority of the things that are raised is irrelevant. It's good for operational purpose, that you can see that you are achieving these, but in terms of an important metric to have, you want to be able to sort of split that out to have more specific more specific incident types that give you the information that you need. As I said, if only a few of these incidents that are logged are critical and the rest have minimal interruption, then that particular metric conceals the information that you actually need. Another important point is that you have to be comfortable asking questions. and your organization has to be comfortable being asked these questions. As human beings, we have the tendency to feel like we're being watched as numbers are exposed and possible issues are being highlighted. Human beings have a tendency to become defensive about this sort of stuff. And this isn't about blame, it's about progress and improvement. And the people who work towards these targets on a daily basis have to be empowered to reach these targets. They have to take ownership and contribute towards the improvement. It can't be a set of metrics that are used to sort of point fingers and highlight that somebody isn't doing something. Obviously, in those instances, it might be necessary to do that if you think that that's what's needed. But typically, these types of metrics are used in order to improve the environment, provide additional training, justify additional headcount, all that sort of stuff. So I don't intend to cover this in much more detail. To be honest, it's a topic that's worthy of a session of its own, possibly a number of sessions running across many hours, I would imagine. This is only going to be scratching the surface, but I'll try to summarize as I can. Firstly, in order to fully define a set of KPIs, it's important to know what success means, and it's only then that you can determine what the measurement, what the specific indicator needs to be. The nature of your business is going to have a great influence on the development of the indicators. So picking up a starter pack or whatever from online, or picking up some details that someone else has used, or setting up the same way as someone else has set up before isn't really going to work. It needs to be sort of married up with your business context. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Although ITIL does have a set of common KPIs for each of the ITIL processes, what we're talking about here is much lower level than the KPIs that are described by ITIL. Well, they feed into the same sort of thing, but we're not talking about at the same level, and they grow across multiple processes, and we're talking about one of the processes right there. So in summary, start with a strategy of what you're aiming to achieve. So for customer satisfaction is your goal, and you may want to set as a target achieving at least 80% of customer satisfaction, with a regular target of something like 89%, 90%. This then leads on to sort of putting in place mechanisms that will allow you to track according to that particular metric. So the NPS stuff, Net Promoter Scores, is a popular mechanism in this area, and therefore surveys and questionnaires in order to bring back and solicit that information. So in terms of target setting and KPIs, you might want to also split these out into 3 areas. I've set up 3 areas because specifically we're talking about the services. General KPIs are going to have many categories and many areas and many levels. But essentially, for this specific session, the 3 areas that I would consider to be a good sort of good separation for the KPIs is the management of service requests, so the targets for managing your service requests. Those are the ones that allow us to understand workload, team, individual performance, effectiveness of the process, the cost associated with the requests that are logged. As you can see some examples on the screen there, number of submitted requests, number of handled requests per team, individual or individual, number of currently open requests. And then the second sort of category, second area that you might want to split into is process targets. And those are the ones that allow you to understand holistically or globally if you're achieving your targets. So process KPIs such as requests within SLA, requests outside of SLA, and then request fulfillment time. Obviously, these are pointless if you're having to do it across all requests, because different requests are going to have different fulfillment time. So it's important to sort of have within each of these the various types of requests that you are actually looking at that particular time. And then the third sort of area is the quality targets. And those are the ones that allow us to measure the standard of excellence over a similar or opposite attribute, and this might be sort of success compared to unsuccessful requests, or the percentage of requests opened, or the average time a request is in a specific status, so for instance pending or approval. Now in terms of sort of bringing that data out, obviously some of these things are really easy, some of these things aren't so easy, but I'm going to try and give you some information that will make things a little bit easier, at least, if not completely easy for you. So again, another set of takeaways. Your current growth strategy will influence your KPIs, and your KPIs should measure your progress to achieving your organizational goals. Lower level KPIs and targets helping to achieve much higher ones. Remember, simple is better and less is more. It's important to understand what has already happened as well as how you're progressing. Current standing is important. Referencing industry KPIs is an okay thing to do, but it's not something that you'll be able to instantly sort of implement and see the benefit of. You should review those and make sure that they fit within your business context. All right, so hopefully that's given you some details on KPIs in general and how to sort of go about setting the KPIs. I think that another important aspect sort of to sort of once you've set these KPIs and these metrics and you're wanting to see you know, how you're faring is the data that you capture, and it's important to know that you use your data that you're capturing to benefit you in these ways. And sort of part of knowing that is going to be to understand the structure within SupportWorks. And first of all, just because Hornbill provide reports doesn't mean that you should keep these reports. Doesn't mean that you should use these or have these or even have them visible. There's no reason why you can't remove the reports that you think are not valid. Hornbill provides a starting point. They provide a set of reports that have in the past been requested or have been discussed and therefore are seen as things that customers might want to start with. They're all going to need to be looked at and put into the right context for them to become sort of useful to you. In some cases, they're not going to be useful at all, and therefore, take them out. The context, as I said, is extremely important because having I think we deliver something like 300 system reports and possibly maybe 40 HTML reports. There's no way that these are going to be fit for the different types of businesses that our customers, that Hornbill customers have. And it might be that you don't concentrate on the service desk, but the delivery via self-service, which I guess you may want to sort of assess the effectiveness of the portal and whether it delivers the thing that it should, more so than the specific achievement of the desk. In which case, the majority of the reports that are currently delivered as a starting point are all about the desk. They're not about the self-service portal. And so creating new reports is a must. This section hopefully will give you will be able to arm you in terms of what you need in order to be able to get what you want out of the data that's stored within SupportWorks. And I believe that means sort of understanding the structure, understanding the way that data is stored. So on your screens right now, what you're looking at is a combination of sort of headings and tables. So for instance, the box that has services in it isn't an actual table, but the two things that it links to are the two main service tables. And we'll go into sort of look at this in the product in a short while. But for now, the information about the particular service that you've defined within your service catalog is stored in a number of tables. The main table is the SC_folio. All right? So that is your service catalog portfolio. And in main, it holds all the information about the service, or it's held within the tables that it's related to. So you can see on the right-hand side there in the short list of boxes, the SC SLA, the SC subscription, the SC data form, and so on and so forth. All of these, I've actually got two SC favorites there, it was a mistake. But they essentially hold all the relevant information about the specific service. So the SC subscriptions table will hold all the subscribers that are subscribed to this specific service. The SLA will hold the SLA. The SE data form, interestingly, holds the questions and answers that have been completed within the self-service wizard forms. So if you want to get specific service-based information out of the service catalog, these are the tables that you'll need to sort of reference. And on the right-hand side, you see that there are some bullet points there. The FK_CMDB_ID, which will have information which is numerical, so 503, which is the service ID itself, okay? So that's the thing that you would need as the key when you're going through across all of these tables that hold service information. Okay, the service name might hold something like corporate internet access, and the VSB title will also typically have whatever title you want to put, but if you left it with whatever the system suggests, it will typically be the same as the service name. Essentially, these things have been put in place so that you can have a name that you would typically refer to the service as internally, but also have a title that your customers can see. So if these things are being consumed via the self-service portal, then they see the title rather than the name. Okay. The bottom left-hand section, starting with the SC_type I, is where the categories are held. So all of the categories with services that are manifested within the portal. So when the customer is going through the self-service portal and they're selecting these categories, these top-level identifiers of the areas, those values are stored in the SC_type I. So if there's anything that you need to bring back across or about a specific category, that's the table that you would have to refer to, and then using that information as the ID that I mentioned earlier in order to relate to the SC folio table to bring back information about the service. Okay, so that's essentially what that is, and we're gonna talk about how you would get the majority of your data out in reporting anyway. But essentially, this is the kind of information that you would need to know. You don't need to be someone who technically knows exactly what these tables are for. You just simply need to know how to get at the data, and I'm going to show you that in a little while as well. The open call table is there because the majority of the requests, in fact all the requests that are logged against a specific service are stored in the open call table. So if it's transactional information that you want, you don't actually have to look at the service unless you want additional information about the specific service. All right. So the second part then is, because once you've got the information about the service, if that's what you're looking to get, if it's transactional, as I said, you need the open call table. And the other thing that you might want is a specific progress or the specific stage that a particular transactional request is currently at. You could also see, if you wanted to bring back the information about a specific service that's related to a specific process, that's also possible within the BPM tables, but essentially all the transactional information you're going to need is in the open call and related tables. Okay, so what you can see on your screen at the moment is the BPM workflow table on the top left and the related tables on the right, the list of boxes, and everything that's got the prefix of BPM is the business process tables. And the bottom section you have with the open call table with the circular objects indicating that, again, if it's transactional and workflow related information that you need, you don't actually need to relate the BPM tables because it's all held within open call. So those circular objects are supposed to show that actually the workflow ID is already in the open call table, the stage ID is already there, the stage title is already there, as well as the stage status and the tasks. So it's although initially, and I've had several discussions with customers where it seemed as if they've had to put quite a lot of effort in linking tables together in order to get the data. The majority, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the information that they needed at the time was already present in a single, possibly two tables that are transactional based rather than services and BPM. Okay. So on the right hand side you've also got the description of what the additional data that you'll be pulling out from, but also got the additional BPM tables, which I didn't include in that list, and they are typically because they're hidden behind buttons within the transactional area. So you have the OC as a, so the BPM_OC means that it's related to a transaction, an open call record, rather than the ones on the top which don't have OC in the name, which means they're not transactional. They're defined once, and typically they won't be related to a call reference. Whereas the BPM_OC_hist is the transactional historical information about the BPM progress. The OC_auth is the transactional authorization information. The OC stage is the transactional stage. So every stage that's progressed, so when it passes from one stage to the next, it historically records the stage information. So you're able to get quite a lot of data out of the system in terms of whereabouts a particular transaction is or how many are currently open at a specific stage. So we talked about the various sort of metrics that we might want to pull off. You know, if these are things that are going on a dashboard, you might want to, in fact, you will want to know where all of this information is held and how you can get at them. The next step of this session then is to show you more detail about the reports and what we already have, as well as the information that you're going to need to know and how to get at it in order to create new reports. This session isn't about creating new reports, it's about understanding where the data is and how the data is stored in order for you to be able to go and get that data. So the first thing I'm going to show you is within the tool, and hopefully this won't be clunky. I'll just switch over to SupportWorks. I'm going to have to stop the session, the screen sharing. Apologies, just bear with me for a second. Okay. Into SupportWorks, which is something that surprisingly quite a lot of customers don't actually know they can do. And it's anywhere within the tool that a form opens up. You're able to sort of identify where in the database that information is stored. So I'll go straight to the categories section first within the service portfolio, just to show you that there is some information that you can gain from here just by clicking in this area in order to tell you where that information is stored. So you can see I have a form opened up. There is a list of categories in here, and opening one of these things up opens up another form, which has gone over to another screen. That opens up another form, and within this form there is several pieces of information. So the first thing I'll do is I'll close that back down just to show you that this is actually a direct link to a table listing out the contents of that table. So if I right click at the very top of this form, I can see that I've got two options at the very bottom, configure and design. Okay, so I can go into configure and see what the actual table name is, but I want to see more specifically the various column headings so that I know what within the table in order that I need to put out in a report if I so wished. Again, it's gone onto another screen. Apologies for that. So I opened up, and if I click on this particular object there, I'll get some property information on the far right. Property information. What I also get is the details of the table that this is linking to. So you can see that this is linked to the SC_type I. Clicking away and then simply clicking on a column heading will give me the specific column within that table that column is referring to. So that is pk_config_type. That's in that particular table. So if I wanted to pull off all of these categories, all I'd simply need to do is select, if I wanted that column only, is to go and create a system report where I'm looking at that specific table, the SC_type I, and if I wanted to only get the types, then it's this particular field within the database table that I would refer to. All right, and you can do that in all of the product. In any part of the product that you're able to see a particular form pop up, you're able to sort of design it. So I'll do a similar thing again within the services area, because I think part of the information that you're going to want to know exists is within the services properties form. Okay, so our initial search screen allows me to see the list of services that I have defined. Once I've hit the search button, just trying to resize the button, I get the list of services. Okay, and again, if I wanted to, I could right click at the very top, hit the design option, and have a look at the table that this specific grid is currently linked to, and I can click on each of these columns and work out what the specific field within it is. I'm actually going to go in and open up one of these services so that it can show you a similar thing within the form designer for a specific field that's on the form when you're looking at any particular service. So we're looking at the service corporate internet access at the moment, and there's lots of information held here. So we can see some headings on the right-hand side here: portfolio status, lifecycle status, service category. So one of the things that typically is sort of needed as part of the reporting on services is to understand the services that you're introducing that are currently in the pipeline mode, or even a list of services that are in catalog mode, or if it's availability that you're tracking on a particular service, it might be your list of services with whatever the status defined in the operational status section here. But also you might want to bring back services owned by a specific person. And this is where that information is. So again, if I right-click at the very top and hit the design option, within that form that pops up, I can click on to that specific field, so the business owner, in order for me to be able to see which table. So you can see now the format is slightly different. Table is the first part, and after the dot is the field within that table that contains the information that's displayed in this format. It's actually a useful thing to be able to do. I mean, obviously you have to have the rights to be able to do this, and obviously you have to be fairly careful because it's easy to move things around. But sometimes, I mean, there are some screenshots of the information held within this area, and there are other ways to get it. But if you want just that quick have a look at the information in order to be able to pull that information out, it's much easier to look in this way, and having a chat with your administrators in order to be able to make sure that you're not saving information, or even a test copy within a test environment will allow you to do things in a much safer way. So again, clicking around all of this information to be able to find the table and the column within that table that holds that information. So the other thing that you also might want to see is the subscriptions. So typically you might want to see, I mean, depending on whether you track costs and all that kind of stuff, but there's lots and lots of information in here that is actually underutilized. It's sort of unused. In most cases, when I'm sort of looking at customer instances, most of this area is blank. Quite a lot of this stuff is unused. But there is a lot of information here that can be sort of used to your advantage. The subscription area will hold not only the subscribers, the individuals that are able to consume this service within, generally consume it so that they can log issues against it, or even log a transactional record against it via the self-service portal, or by phoning, or by sending an email. But within this area, you also have the create request forms. And in here, there's some interesting information that potentially might be useful for when you're reporting. I'll just quickly come out of that design mode so that I can show you what I mean. So if I go back into there, you can see that I have a list of, I have some data in the costs tab. I also have a couple of subscribers, organizational. There is a small limitation to this area actually, because if you're hoping to get the individual subscribers, you actually have to link two tables, because if you've subscribed against an organization, you're not going to be able to get the individuals. All you'll get is the organization. Obviously, the individuals are also related to an organization, and therefore picking up the user table where the ID equals whatever the ID here is will give you a list of those individuals that belong to this organization and therefore are also subscribed to this particular service. Similar thing with departments as well, because you can do the subscription based on a department. But going back to this edit request form, you can see in here that there is a whole lot of information. Services that are typically going to be assigned to a specific group or an individual is stated at the top there. The specific process that it is related to is here, and the questions that are going to be asked, and therefore so earlier on we looked at the data form, or we briefly discussed the tables that hold this information. So the data form itself is the data that's used to capture the information is specified in here. And if you wanted more details about that specific information that was captured across all transactional requests for a specific service, you would only simply need to look at this particular area here, find out where this is in order to be able to pull that data off. Okay, but there's lots of information here, and in exactly the same way as I previously sort of went into the design mode and then sort of looked at the specific field in order to work out where that information is held, you can simply click on it, and on the right hand side where it says data binding, you can see that there is an SC_data form .fk_wizard, and that is the specific column within the data form table that holds that information, that internet connection service request value. Okay, so that is sort of the one thing that is useful to know. It's useful to be able to go away and find you know, that sort of information. The other thing that you're going to want to, depending on obviously how interested you are in more information about the tables, is that there is a schema report within the help menu item that will give you even more information about all the tables and the type of information that it holds. It won't be able to indicate to you whereabouts in support works it's actually displayed. This is why it's important, and this is why it's useful for you to know as individuals that are wanting to pull data off, whereabouts is this. So because typically what you'll do is you'll see that there is a piece of information that's stored somewhere, but it's just missing. Is that, where is that stored, and how can I get that out in a meaningful way and display it amongst a whole load of other things that I might want to also have displayed? That, because that's missing, it's much easier for you to just have a look at where it is in support works, go into that design mode, see where it is, and then go back to your reporting and pull that report off. Okay. The other thing I'm going to very quickly do, because you've seen the tables that I presented to you earlier on in the presentation, here is the same list, or one set of tables that I displayed up there. If you're wanting to know what information is held in there without looking at a specific form, you can also do, you know, create one of these search items and have that information displayed in this sort of format. Now I'll just quickly show you what that looks like when you're creating it. If you create a brand new one, you simply give it a name and you do the select star from the table name, and that will be able to, that will bring back, obviously again you need access to this area to be able to do that, and you might want to ask your administrators to go and pull that data off. But essentially what it means is any table that's in the database can be pulled off in terms of sort of knowing what it is that you're that you have there. Okay, and it also means that you can, once you've pulled that data off, you can export that out. So if you're wanting to sort of create information from other tools and other areas, or put them into spreadsheets, dashboards, or whatever, you can export that out from here straight into Excel and start to manipulate that data, or start to, you know, roll up that data as Excel, with the functionality within Excel, for instance. Alternatively, you might just want to know what information is there so that you can start to putting criteria together. So if you're wanting to know how to split something out, or whether you want to know how what type of value is stored in a specific column, so that you can provide that as a criteria within your reports, you can sort of use this mechanism to pull that data out. I'll just quickly double click another one, so just so as you can see what's in. Actually, the folio one will probably be the best one to have, because you can see here that there's, you know, obviously if you use that area, there's a lot of information in here around cost and price, cost per request, that can be transactions, or across all the transactions within a specific request type. You might want to understand what that means in terms of fulfillment, as well as the cost of that fulfillment. Okay, so that's that area there. I'm going to quickly now dip into sort of the reports that are already available out of the box, and I'm just going to quickly show you the ones that are already available for a customer. I'll just pull that over there. Hopefully you're using self-service. Within self-service there are sections that present reports or provide reports to customers. Now in most cases, the ones, at least the ones with SLAs, are actually hidden. In some organizations, it's I guess it's probably a little bit too much to expose this level of detail, certainly in the early stages of using SLAs, to customers. But there's you know, they can be fairly useful, and you know, certainly the service request costs one, if you're using costs, will be very useful, because this is an area that doesn't consume a specific SupportWorks license. And if you have sort of service owners that are going in and having a look at the, you know, the requests that have been logged against a specific service, or they're looking to see what the transactional cost across all of these service requests are, they don't actually need to consume a support works license. Obviously, if they're defining the services as well as updating the details, the processes that these service requests will follow, then they will need it. But simply sort of looking at these details, they won't. And also, this is an area that's largely untapped because we provide these, and essentially once customers start to use the self-service portal and they've hidden this My Reports section, they don't really go back to it again. And there's no reason why you can't create new reports that you then deliver through the self-service portal to your customers. Obviously, you don't have to deliver them to every customer, but you could potentially have different reports or different types of reports that you might want to make available, certainly around the services, for people that are interested in that sort of data, or make decisions based on the information that they get. Possibly currently in an email or in an Excel that someone then exports out and creates for them. What you could do is you could create the reports and have them displayed within the self-service portal. Okay, so that's one set of reports that are there. Unfortunately, they are pretty much unused. The other area is within the management information and reporting. And again, in here there are two sections. The top section, which is the system reports, and essentially those are that's the wizard-driven based reports, and there's quite a lot in here. I think some 300 odd reports are standard. These aren't all of them. I mean, there's more than those that are delivered as standard in this particular instance. This is it's basically the instance that all customers have access to, and it's refreshed every night. But there's additional examples in here. But some of the ones some of the interesting examples of the service-based reports are in here. So you have some portfolio services by cost, and again, all of these should be looked at and possibly used as a starting point, not necessarily sort of left and abandoned because they don't quite fit with what it is that you're aiming to achieve. The idea is that you should sort of pick up some knowledge around how to create these reports and start to make use of them if they're any good. If they're not, then start to modify them so that they fit better with your aims and your objectives. All right, but there are some reports around the ITSM area. Again, as I said, more and more customers are, non-IT based customers are adopting support works. There's some examples in there of non-IT related reports as well. But some other areas that you'll have an ITIL based folder structure, but another area within the report section is this request fulfillment. And I think I've got some additional examples in here, but the creation of these reports is not very difficult to do. I mean, simply right-clicking, selecting create report, new report, specifying the type of report that it is, and then following the instructions on the screen. So simply sort of indicating on a basic level the table that you want to extract the information from, and the additional information that you might want from a specific. So you can see there on my screen I have the transactional table as well as the service table in order to pull back the information about the number of submitted service requests for a specific service, because I want that to be selectable as well. I'll show you what that looks like. If it's, hopefully I haven't broken it since my last execution, but you can see there that you have that I've specified the specific service, and it's allowing me to be able to then select a date. I just changed that. I've got some really old data in there, you'll have to excuse me for that. But if I did that, and then we start to get some information back about the grouped by a particular service, but the number of requests that have been logged against that service. Now, part of the reason why I chose, because I didn't have to join the two tables in order to be able to get this report, but I do have to join that table if I want to get the name of the report of the service that's in question, because what's held in the transactional table is the ID. So if you remember the presentation, we talked about the key. This is essentially the key that's held in the open call table, and new equipment is held in this service table. So bringing the two together, joining based on the key, then allows me to have on a report the name of the specific service as well as the various requests or the number of requests that have been logged against them. Okay, so on a basic level, that's how easy it is to pick that up. Now, a slightly more complex area is the HTML reports, and obviously if you're already familiar with the reporting area, then you'll know that this is on the server. And for those of you that are on an on-premise sort of solution, then there may not be an issue with going in there and modifying some of these reports. There are some there again out of the box. You can see there's portfolio service by cost, portfolio service by status and capacity, and various others. But so that if you're on an on-premise solution, then there shouldn't be an issue, or you shouldn't have an issue with being able to access that area, and picking an example, picking one of these reports, copying it, making a new version of it with a slightly different focus possibly. You will have to have some knowledge on PHP, essentially, because and XML, as that's a technology that's being used on the back of these particular reports. All right, that is essentially it in terms of this presentation. Hopefully, as I said in the beginning, this is a basic intro, sort of basic discussion in terms of KPI setting. Hopefully I've given you some pointers in terms of what to consider when setting the KPIs that you might have to start working with. But obviously, if this is a starting point, then by all means you should go back into sort of looking at the online resource that's available. For at least for the next week, you'll have me available if you have any additional questions after this session via email at least, and hopefully they'll be short and sharp and very quick. You mentioned this during the presentation, and I'll commit to sort of responding back to you if there's anything that's been unclear in this particular presentation. So hopefully if you've got any questions, although I haven't seen any pop up in the questions box, if you have any questions, I will attempt to answer them now.
Thank you, Samurai, for taking us through that presentation. I hope everyone found it useful. If you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact me or your relationship manager. Finally, thank you everyone for your time today. Goodbye.